loud. There we go. Welcome, y'all. My name's Matt. I know that all of you just took a test, Proctored test through the Demon. Welcome for all of our free subscribers, and of course, anyone who is currently basic, premium, live, that kind of stuff. This is kind of a general class. I'm gonna do a couple minutes of like, hey, what do you do with this now that you've taken a test? Answer some Q&A, and we'll see where the cards lie after that. If anyone, you have better things to do or need to be elsewhere, please don't feel obligated to stay. This is going to be recorded. You can, as far as I know, watch it regardless of whether you're free or live, for instance. But I want to start off a little bit with like, hey, for those of you about to take the August test, good luck. I want to encourage you between now and then to do the exact same thing that you've been doing for the last however many weeks or months. It's nothing special. It's just another practice test. Try not to put the test on a pedestal. So like, don't start jogging, don't stop jogging, don't start drinking coffee, don't stop drinking coffee, like all those kind of things that you do to get through your day on a regular basis. Like, continue doing those things, including on the day of. Don't do anything crazy. That's essentially like the general advice we like to give is think of it as just another practice test, just like you took today, right? Or the practice test that you've been taking for the past bit. So yeah, all of those things. I got a message. If you're not done with the test yet, you can certainly mute me and keep going. Please don't feel like you need to stay with me. This is going to be recorded. You can also pause and resume later. If, for instance, you have longer time and that kind of thing, some accommodations of some variety, please feel free, like keep doing what you're doing, just mute me. You can drop off Zoom, whatever makes sense for you. Okay, so getting ready for this test on this week, do the same thing, treat it like a practice test. That also means don't swing for the fences. If you've been scoring in the 160s or 150s by doing X, do X again. Like, the test day is not the day that you're going to get your best score ever. If you go in with like, I'm going to get a 170 today, even though you've never done it before. So please just treat it as the same as any other practice test. To talk a little bit about reviewing for tests, sections, like those kind of things, we like to encourage people to blind review. I think it is by far the best way to review. It's teaching yourself from the mistakes that you made. And so any question that you had that you either you actually got it wrong, or, and you'll remember some of these, you got it correct, but you weren't like 100% on it. It was like, oh, I got it down to 2 and you guessed right. Well, I can promise you that there aren't 2 correct answers there. There is 1 definitively correct and 4 completely wrong 4 completely wrong answers. And so I really encourage you to go through those questions and learn from them. Take the time to blind review them, which is you're going to reattempt them, untimed circumstances, and go through all of the sort of like analysis that you need to do, like understand the argument, make a prediction, understand what the question is asking you, frame a response, go looking for that response, etc. So the big point is that you're giving yourself another crack at the test at that question without knowing what the correct answer is, without knowing oh, well, it's B. Well, of course it's B. It makes so much sense. That teaches you nothing other than the correct answer was B. Instead, if you reattempt it, if you genuinely go through the process again, you might make discoveries, which might include, oh, I misread something. I was going too fast. I misread something. That happens all the time. So be careful and learn from those kind of things, but also it's giving you the opportunity to go back through and be like, okay, listen, I remember that I chose B on this. I got this answer wrong, but now I'm going to articulate why B is wrong and go back through and go, oh, you know what? D is actually the answer I'm looking for. That is the correct answer. Here's why, etc. So we strongly encourage everyone to blind review, and that might take a while. That might take all of tomorrow's study time, for instance. So don't leave stones unturned, squeeze the berries for all the juice, and whatever other euphemism or analogy you want to use. If you just move on to another time section or another test, you're essentially playing the slot machine of well, let's see what I get today. That's not actually going to help you improve. You could spend 2 or 3 days reviewing your mistakes and the questions that you got correct but had questions about, and learn from those things. So I really want to encourage people to do that. As a general sort of thing, most people don't need to take more than 1 practice test a week. In fact, I think if you are taking more than 1 practice test a week, that's too much, even for people scoring in the 170s. You should instead be doing time sections throughout the week and then a practice test. If you're scoring below the 160s, I would encourage you to do a practice test every other week. Give yourself the time to really sink in and spend a day or two afterwards of your study time, working on and focusing on the things that you got wrong and learning from them, reading the explanations after you've blind review, watching the videos for how the worlds were made in that particular game and that kind of stuff. There's a lot of opportunity to learn from a single section or test. So want to encourage that. I got a couple of questions that I think are specific on here to what I'm talking about right now. Someone asked, would you advise to go through the last few questions that you didn't get to, or is that a waste of time? I don't think it's a waste of time, but it should not be your priority. Your priority needs to be getting to the questions, reviewing the questions that you attempted, because you want perfect accuracy on the questions you attempt. If right now you are getting 15 out of 25 on a section, you are going way too fast. You need to slow down and actually aim for about 15 questions and get all of those right. If you then bubble in answers on the last 10, you'll have a better score. Over time, your understanding will increase, your efficiency will increase, and you'll be able to get a little bit deeper and a little bit deeper and a little bit deeper into the section. Just to be really clear, some of the best practice tests I ever didn't finish the sections. 178, 179, did not finish the reading comp or LR because you don't need to. Instead, get all the questions that you attempt correct. And if you right now are scoring in the 130s, for instance, you should be aiming for the first 5. If you're in the 140s, the first 8 to 10, 150s, the first 10 to 15, et cetera, et cetera. It really is about accuracy, because if you get perfect accuracy on the questions you attempt, that means you actually understand them. You don't get 15 in a row correct by accident. If you do 20 and you miss question 3 and 7 and 11 and 13 and 16, that's really not good. You're not getting paid for your work. You're in fact taking a 25% pay cut on the work that you attempted. Instead, if you do 12 and get all those right and then bubble in answers, you're actually getting a free bonus of questions that you didn't even attempt, because you're going to get some of those correct just by guessing. Okay, so wow, there's a lot of questions already. A couple of other things, and I'll start going through these questions. Certainly people can have their cameras on if they want to right now. Don't feel any obligation to do that. But if you also want to raise your hands, you certainly can raise your hands and we can talk things out. But I'm going to just a couple other things, and then I'm going to start doing like Q&A, that kind of stuff. The last sort of thing is there's a lot of sort of concerns that are outside of the LSAT, and we encourage you to try to set those aside because there are more important things to focus on, and that is getting the best LSAT score that you can. So things like the writing sample, don't worry about that until after you've sat for your test. Then do it, move on with your life, right? That is a thing that is worth 0 LSAT points. Your application stuff, like your letters of recommendation, yeah, they are important to jump through that hoop, but they're worth 0 LSAT points. The thing that is the most determinative of where you're going to go to school and what scholarship you are potentially going to get to that school is your LSAT and your undergraduate GPA. Once you've graduated the first time with an undergraduate GPA, that is set in stone. So if you're beyond that, that is done, locked. You cannot do anything. Getting a master's does not help. Getting a second undergraduate degree does not help. It will not change once you've graduated the first time with an undergrad degree. If you haven't graduated yet, focus on getting straight A's. If that means you don't have time to study for the LSAT, guess what? Wait. I am 38 years old. I took 17 years off or something like that between my undergrad and when I went to law school, and I'm killing it in law school. I'm at the top of my class. I'm clerking after graduation. I already have that stuff locked up. I promise you that law school is still going to be there a year or two from now. And so focus on getting your best LSAT and then worry about the extra stuff. To that end, we generally encourage people to apply in September or when the things first open for that particular school, because there are some schools that, for instance, don't open till October 1st. Be a rock star. Apply in September and have an offer by October, because I did that. Many students do that. It is super, super awesome to go, oh, you know what? I already have 5 offers. Other people have not even applied yet. You are taking a seat and money off the table. The inverse is also true. If you apply in like January, half the seats are gone. Half or more of the money is gone. Don't be in that position. Set yourself up for success by getting your best LSAT score and then applying at the beginning of the next cycle. That might be this September. That might also not be until next September. That's what we encourage. You know, you got to make your own decisions and do your own due diligence and what makes sense for you. And like, I don't know if any of you are independently wealthy or any of that kind of stuff. In order to get the best chance of getting in and getting the most money, applying at the beginning of the cycle sets you up as a different candidate. At the end of the cycle, they're plugging holes, and you might not be the person that they need to get a better LSAT median for that school. And then, okay, they reject you or waitlist you. So there's a bunch of merit to that kind of stuff. I just want to encourage you. You can find out more about specific schools by checking out lsatdemon.com/scholarships, the scholarship estimator. I encourage people to listen to the free podcast, Thinking LSAT and LSAT Demon Daily. There's just so much good stuff on there. I still listen to it. I'm freaking 3L. I find it interesting and entertaining, but also there's just so much good information that is available to people. So I see your hand, Yashika. I'm going to answer a couple of questions through the chat, and then I'll come to you, and then I'll keep going. So someone said, do you think I should take the LSAT writing before or after the scored LSAT? I think I answered that. Don't worry about it until after. Like, do it like 2 or 3 days after you've sat for before your score is released. Don't wait for like 2 weeks, because then your score might get delayed from being released. But don't worry about it, because it's really not worth it. It's worth 0 LSAT points. It's a red flag generator. Can you, with minimal typos, follow directions and answer the prompt? That is it. Like, you don't go off the reservation, so to speak, with answering something that just has nothing to do with what they're asking you to do. Okay, will you have time to answer a question I have specific to my own LSAT studying difficulties? Potentially at the end after I turn off the recording, but that might not be for a while. So if you have specific stuff, hang on to it or ask a question and I'll see if it's applicable and can answer it. So that's fine. Shannon asked, is the time shown on the actual test? Yes, the LSAT daemon is modeled as close as we could to the Law Hub, which is where you're sort of you're taking the test sort of through Law Hub. And the time shows. I encourage you to also click on it and make it go away until the 5-minute warning pops up. And then that's going to pop up. You hit OK, and then it counts down. Ignore the clock as best you can, because if you're rushing the clock, you are focused on the wrong thing. If it takes you 5 minutes to answer one question, totally fine. Get paid for that rather than spending 3 minutes and going, oh, I'm taking too long. I think it's C, and move on. Well, you probably just flushed 3 minutes down the toilet. Instead, get paid for the 5 that you spend to get it right. Molly asked, for people taking the upcoming August test, would you recommend squeezing in one more full practice test, or should this be the last? I mean, my feeling is probably should be the last, because especially if it was like a decent one and like in your wheelhouse, because if it wasn't, and if you take more, I think that you have the very real possibility of going into a test stress spiral where you're like, oh my God, I didn't score a good score, and I need to take another one tomorrow to get a good score. And then you get an even worse one, and now you're pulling your hair out. That is just not a good thing. I have literally watched students go from the 160s to the 140s in a matter of days by doing that. So like, hey, if this was just a decent test for you, learn from it, move on. You don't need to squeeze in another one. Okay, one more question and then I'll come to you, Shika. So someone said, I'm new here and I'm having much difficulty finishing the test on time. To answer, you don't need to, and you probably shouldn't. I'm missing entire passages, entire games. Do you have any tips on how to improve? Yes, I have lots of tips. I think I gave some of them at the top. You don't have to finish. Like, that's the first tip, and you probably shouldn't. Your goal right now, if you're, for instance, in the 140s, is to get to the 150s. It's not to finish. To get to the 150s, you need to get a couple more questions right across the entire test. And so that might mean slowing down significantly and getting 12 questions right because you attempted 10 of them and then bubbled in answers for the rest of them. That would be forward progress. You are slowing down, you're understanding stuff. Over time, you will naturally get faster as your understanding increases. Okay, Yashika, you've been very patient. Are you there?
Yeah, I am. Thank you so much for doing this. First off,
of course. My pleasure.
My question's kind of like a 2-part question.
Okay.
So I'm aiming for like a 175 plus because there's other parts of my application that like aren't that great. So I'm kind of banking on the LSAT. But the first part of my question is, how long before our test do you think we should be scoring in like our goal score range to be able to sit confidently on test day? Like, I registered for September. How long before that should I be scoring in like the range I want?
I mean, I think it's like the day or two before the test registration closes, you have to pull the trigger, right?
Yeah.
And so I do not think that you should be signing up 3 months in advance. absolutely not. That is a likely that is likely flushing money down the toilet because you might not be ready yet. And so if your goal is 160 or 165 or 170 or 175 or anywhere else, you should be scoring in that neighborhood, plus or minus a couple points, by the time the registration deadline is looming, like a couple days before, because you have to make the decision. Now, if you sign up and you don't continue to improve and then actually get consistently to that, you can withdraw. And I would encourage you to do that. Does that suck? Yes. Is it actual money? Absolutely. The cost benefit analysis is difficult because I'm not paying for it. You all are individually paying for that kind of stuff, and you got to do what you makes sense to you. But if you blow a shot at the LSAT because you weren't ready yet on actual test day, that is not indicative of who you are as a test taker. And you might really come to regret that in like 4 months when you're actually ready to do like 2 or 3 in a row and get your best LSAT. The dollars and cents of it is, yes, $200 is real money, but at a apparent value of around 10 grand per LSAT point of improvement, I think that that kind of puts in perspective, hopefully, the value of going up on even 1 point. And so if you had already sort of like wasted a attempt earlier and you can't get that back, you might not have that opportunity to improve by 1 or more points. I started too early. I admit that. It was also a time when they weren't keeping track. They literally would let you take as many as you wanted. And so I went from a 163 when I was scoring in like the mid or low 160s to a 171 was my official final 3.5 years ago or whatever it was. But I was scoring well above that like 7 months later, right? I took it too early. And I wasn't ready yet for when I actually took my first one. And I think that stressed me out more than it helped.
Gotcha. That makes a lot of sense. And then the second part of my question is kind of specific to logical reasoning. Sure. That is like the bane of my existence. I have been doing 4-section tests because it gives me like more practice with logical reasoning. But since the beginning of when I started studying, which was like 5-ish months ago, it has been my worst section. And then I got the loophole because a lot of people recommended that book. And I've been like using those strategies. I haven't seen like much improvement. So I just feel really stuck with that. And then on some practice tests, when I do sort of improve on logical reasoning, my reading comp or logic games takes a hit. So it's kind of like a lose-lose either way. I was wondering if you have any like advice for that type of situation.
Yeah. So I've heard a lot of people use the loophole. I've also heard that it's garbage and does a lot of theory and a lot of like bad advice that's making it overly convoluted. And my sort of response to you is if it's not helping you, why are you still beating your head against that wall? If you've been using it for like
other wall to beat it against.
Sure. Well, here's the thing. Like you have free resources through the Demon with an LSAT Demon free account. See if that makes sense to you. If you by any means have the ability to get the LSAC fee waiver, you could get 4 months of basic for $30, which is probably about the price that you paid for that book. By getting the fee waiver. If you don't, it is a little bit more expensive, and it is self-serving for me to say, hey, try the Demon. But I encourage you to try the Demon for free. See if the explanations that we provide on those 3 free tests make sense to you. If they do, in a way that the loophole doesn't, give us a try. I spent probably about $1,000 over the course of a year on like my LSAT prep, doing like books and class and like that kind of stuff. I am currently going to law school for $0. I got 13 full rides. I got almost $2 million worth of scholarships from the 18 or so schools that I applied to. Even if you get a scholarship of $10,000 a year, the cost of doing some LSAT prep versus the benefit of scholarship is astronomically like disproportionate. And so I get it. It's very real money. Not everyone can afford actual paying for that kind of stuff. That's why we provide as much as we can for free. But I want to encourage you to look at how we break these things down in a very common sense. Like, did you read it? Did you actually understand it? Do you have a complaint about this shitty argument that was just presented to you? If you do, you're reading it like critically enough. And then, did you understand the question that you just read and what they're asking you to do now? Yes, great. Predict an answer. That is the way to kill it on all of the LSAT, not just LR, but also reading comp and logic games. Predicting the answer is the key, because then you're like, oh, I know what the answer is. This answer doesn't say that. This answer doesn't say that. This answer does say that. Fantastic. This answer and this answer don't say that. I have now spent all the time in the world understanding the argument and blown through the answers in like 30 seconds and know for sure that I got the correct answer and eliminated the 4 incorrect ones. So as a general thing, be more aggressive, be less passive. Don't nod along to conclusions. Be like, no, that conclusion doesn't make sense. Even if you feel it in your soul, right? Like, I'm kind of a progressive. I believe in things like global climate change. And if there's an argument that says we should plant more trees because they'll help with global climate change, I'm like, no, we should not. They're going to be terrible, right? We have to combat those kind of things because you're being a lawyer. You're being the opposing counsel to that argument. And so I encourage you, be really active in digging into that argument. Be really active and engage with that. The last thing I want to say, Yashika, is that the sections themselves vary in difficulty from test to test. And so it is highly likely that you will encounter from this test to the next one that the LR might go up or down in difficulty. Same thing with the other sections. It balances out with like the score track, with the score scale, but you might encounter a test today where -7 is a 170, and you might encounter one tomorrow where -5 is. -5 is an easier test, so you can miss less. So the sort of like how many you missed is kind of comparing apples and oranges sometimes. It varies test to test and even section to section on how the test is difficult and the sections are difficult. I hope that's helpful.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that was actually really helpful. I think the explanation videos are definitely something I could be spending more time on. Congratulations on law school, by the way.
Thank you. I'm enjoying it. I love it. Wouldn't pay for it. I recommend to others to do the same. Okay, what is the difference between our score and our accuracy? So your accuracy is how many you got correct on questions attempted. So like if you attempted 10 and you got all 10 of them right, 100% accuracy. If you bubble in answers for all of the answers or for all the questions, as you should, for any questions you don't get to, you might get a couple of bonus points, which will increase your score. There's no penalty for guessing on the ones you don't get to. You must and should be bubbling in answers for those. But accuracy is really what matters, because if you have crap accuracy, it's going to be hard for you to improve overall. If you have great accuracy, that means you actually understand. Over time, you'll start to get faster. Jamie said, should you stop studying a day or two before the real test? No, just keep doing it. Keep doing little bits like drilling if that's what you've been doing. Just don't put it on a pedestal. Just keep doing what you've been doing. Don't start drinking coffee. Don't stop. Don't start studying in a different way. Don't stop studying. It's just another practice test. Shanna, or sorry, that was Shanna. Yeah, Shanna, are retaking the same practice test counterproductive? I mean, my argument is that there's almost 100 of them out there. You got plenty of other materials. Take a test, learn as much as you can from it, then move on to the next one and see if you've actually learned stuff. Apply the lessons learned to that new test. Continue doing that. If you take a test a week, that's almost 2 years worth of LSAT tests. I just said LSAT tests. That is redundant. Yeah, it's almost 2 years worth of LSATs. So I wouldn't worry so much about repeating stuff. I think in the moment, retrying a question, retrying a game because you had difficulty with it, that has incredible value. But redoing an entire test, I'm a little skeptical of that. Jack, I see your hands. I'm going to answer like 2 more questions and I'll spin to you. Jake said this might be a dumb question. There's no dumb questions, I promise. This might be a dumb question, but if you don't guess, it's not counted against you. You should guess because guessing is not counted against you. If you get something wrong, it's just worth 0 points. If you guess, so you have a 1 in 5 chance of getting it correct if you randomly guess. And so if you guess on 5 questions in a row, you should expect to get around 1 of them correct. There's statistical variation. You might get 2 sometimes, you might get 0 other times, but you should guess because it doesn't count against you and you will get points for guessing. Jeff said, I'm sorry if it's been said, but is this recording being uploaded for free? I believe so. I believe anyone, if you had access to the syllabus page today, you should have access to the recording. Oh, Jack, you answered the question that I just answered. How nice of you. Jack, what's your question? You got your hand raised.
It's Jacques, by the way. And
I'm so sorry, Jacques.
It's all good. It's all good.
Please correct me. Thank you. I appreciate it. And thank you for being polite.
Absolutely. No, so I just want to give you a little insight on my study plan a little bit. So I was told, of course, that taking practice tests is the best way to see improvements in your score over whatever time you set to study for this exam. Mm-hmm. But you know, my score was the same as my first diagnostic on this one. So sure. Like I work a full-time job, so I tend to drill a section maybe a day after work, just because I feel like that's the most manageable for me. So sure. Logic games was my worst section on this one. So I was thinking of setting a whole month dedicated towards understanding logic games. Do you think there's any value in like emphasizing a certain section over a certain amount of time, or should you be equally spreading your time with the whole test?
So if something's your weakest and you want it to become like a strength or just get better at it in general, I don't think that there's a problem with prioritizing it. Okay. And that means like, hey, I'm going to do a single logic game every day as like a drilling or as like just an attempt at that. And then you also do your other studies. But I wouldn't suggest, and I think it's actually harmful if you go, hey, I'm going to focus on logic games and not do the other 2. I think that is the wrong decision. Prioritize is different than exclusivize. And that's not a word, but I think you know what I'm saying. Like if you exclusively do logic games for a month, it is not going to be good for your other sections. And it might not even be good for your logic games to the level of detriment that's going to happen elsewhere. So I prioritize logic games. And it's one of the reasons why I'm now like the logic games teacher, is because I got too perfect and became like a master of it. I don't remember the last time I missed a question on logic games. I did that by making myself do logic games every day. I'd come home from work. I'd spend like an hour drilling or, you know, working through a section or whatever on logic games. I'd go make dinner and then I'd have my regular study time afterwards. That would be like a section or drilling or whatever from the various 3. So I kept up sort of like my normal schedule, but I added a bit of logic games to that. So I think it can help you. And logic games is definitely a place where most people start the worst and have the ability to make significant improvements. because, and that's not to say that you can't make significant improvement in the others. It's just usually people are like, hey, I showed up to logic games, I got 7 right. And then like maybe 3 months later, they're perfect. That's a huge swing. Swings like that don't tend to happen as frequently in the other things. That doesn't mean that they're not just as learnable. It's just you're more familiar with reading comp and LR as a general thing. Most people are. And so you don't have as much room to improve because you're already scoring better. So to answer your question shortly, Jacques, I think that it's fine to prioritize. Okay. The other thing that I want, man, what was it that I was going to, when I was studying, the first 9 months of when I was studying, I was working 2 full-time jobs. I was doing like 70, 80 hours a week. I was getting up a little bit earlier, studying before I went to work. I was doing drilling on my phone throughout the day. When I was, instead of going on Facebook or TikTok or whatever it is, I do 1 LR question. Well, over the course of a day, that adds up to like 10, 15 questions. That's half of a section right there. And then I would try to do my sit down like hour or so study time at the end of that. So if I can find the time, I encourage anyone else that you can also find the time to prioritize the LSAT. And that doesn't mean do 3 hours. That means 1 quality hour a day. It needs to be your best hour. And so if, for instance, you get up and go to the gym in the morning because pumping irons, like that's when you can do it, it's the best thing. Do you want to go to law school for free? Swap that out for the LSAT, go to the gym after work. Okay, does that make sense, Jacques?
Yes, it does. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Robert, I see your hand. I'm going to answer just a couple more questions in the chat, and then I'll swing to you as well. Someone said, should I feel that I got lucky if I did bad in the experimental, or are the experimental questions experimental for a reason? So at the LSAT Demon, the experimental sections are real sections. And so if you missed things on that, they're just a real section from a different test. You have the opportunity to learn from those just like you did otherwise. And if you did worse on that than, for instance, the actual section, that is fortuitous for you for today, but it might not be for tomorrow. And so learn from that. They are not experimentals in the grand scheme of things. They are from real tests. They are real sections. We just, like, we don't have access to the LSAT, the LSACs experimental, like whatever, where they're testing stuff out. So we just substitute actual sections for the experimental. I got a long one. Hold on one second. I'm studying for a bit over a month, trying to aim for about 3 hours a day. That might be too much. You can slow down. I feel like I've made substantial growth in my understanding, just in general. Really thought I'd been doing a good job, yet I'm not seeing improvements in my scores. Expected to make at least substantial growth at first. Wow, this is a text wall. Pardon me. First, given I had not done any previous studying prior to the Demon, but still I've made minimal growth in my scores of the test. Any suggestions on what might be doing so wrong? What I should be doing? I've heard what you said about slowing down and making sure you got every attempted question right. Is that something I should focus on more? Yes, absolutely. Accuracy is the #1 focus, always. I also want to point out, I actually put this up here for Jacques' question, but I put this up here for a reason. 150 and 160 are just completely arbitrary. This, you could do any sort of like 10 this. So if I reached into, I'm gonna use you, Jacques, because you were here and I appreciate you asking a question. I'm gonna reach into Jacques' head and be like, Jacques is in fact a 155 student. Like, I know that that's where he is in life, okay? This is where Jacques is. On a bad day, he could score a 150. On a good day, he could score a 160. Plus or minus 5 is very typical, okay? And it's going to look like a scatter plot like this, where it's like, hey, the vast majority of them are going to be in like the 153 to 158 range, but on your worst day, you could totally score a 150, and on your best day, you could totally score a 160. That's score variance at its finest, and that's typical. Now, What this means is you could also be a 150 student and score really lucky and get a 155 your first time. You did great, like you guessed C for every answer and you got more of them than you should have, statistically speaking. You might then spend several months and improve as a student to being a 160. Guess what? Your bell curve now goes to 165, but on your worst day, you could still score 155. The point is that your bell curve has moved up, and so it's less likely, but you might not realize with like just a few data points that you've actually improved, okay? And I think that's a really important thing to just point out, that score variance is real. Your point, the goal is to go from here where you're a 150 and move it to where you're a 160 so that even on your worst day, you're scoring what your best day used to be. Okay. Okay, a couple more, Robert, and then you've been very patient. So Karina said, at what point should we pencil in ones we are not going to get to? I typically did that at the 5-minute mark. I would, so like, hey, I was on question 14, 5-minute mark pops up. It kind of throws me out of the moment anyway, because it's very jarring. I would go to the end and work my way back, like doing C, 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 whatever. And then get back to question 14, continue working, get to one more question, get it correct. If I get that one correct and I still have a little bit more time, sure, I'll work on question 16. So I typically did at the 5-minute mark, that's when I would doing it. Okay, Robert, you've been very patient. Thank you. What is your question, sir?
Sure. So I'm in a little bit different situation than most. I'm working on a timeline, trying to get into law school next year in the fall.
Okay.
I've got the age thing going. So and this is my first time doing a practice test. I've only been studying 5 weeks. I had roughly the same percentage, roughly the same number of questions wrong in each of the 3 sections that were graded.
Okay.
I did feel like I ran out of time. I was conscious of running out of time on logic games, but not with the others. I don't know if that's enough info to give you, to ask for any suggestions you have that might help me and quickly improve. I've got the LSAT scheduled in September and October.
Okay. You said September and October?
Yes.
I mean, you can still make plenty of progress. September is like an entire month away, you know, like you can make significant progress. So I'm not going to say like go expecting to move the moon. Instead, expect to understand one more question. And by doing that, you'll start to realize that the LSAT is cyclical. They keep asking the same thing over and over and over again. They're testing the same thing on test 1, which is from 1990, as they are test 92, which was from last year. They are testing the exact same things. The context is different. They're talking about the internet now instead of 8 tracks, right? The other thing I'm going to say is I totally understand your sort of desire to go here and now because time is of the essence.
Yes.
What I will say is, without asking your age, because that's none of my business.
I don't mind sharing. I'm 62. I'd be starting when I'm 63.
Okay.
Next year.
So
I've got a number of years to benefit from it.
Sure. I totally get that. Lawyers work till they're dead anyway. So the thing that I was going to tell you is that you wouldn't be the oldest person in my class because there is a woman in my class who is in her late 60s and is like a rock star grandma. And everyone loves Uma at Maryland, which is where I go. And so what I want to encourage you to do, Robert, is I get it that you've just started. September's right around the corner. October's right around the corner. Maybe you get your best LSAT. Maybe you're also independently wealthy. That's none of my business. But if I was you, I would still not want to sign myself up for several $100,000 of potentially non-dispersible debt because you cannot get rid of student loan debt by going to bankruptcy court. And that debt can get transferred. So don't like lock yourself and your family should you have one, into that kind of tragic situation, I encourage you, like, yeah, shoot your shot, but also really think long and hard before you apply this year if you can't get into a school that you'd be happy going to for as little cost as you can. And so I don't know what that looks like for you. I don't know if you're just looking to get a law degree because you need that in order for, like, maybe you have a business that you're currently trying to take in a different direction or do something like that. I don't know what your situation is, and I don't think we should get into it here.
Sure.
But the sort of point is, I don't think that the age matters for what we would recommend, even though you are older than most students ever will be.
The reason I bring it up is it drives my timeline more than anything else.
Totally.
If all I can do is get into school, but I'm not getting enough of a scholarship to cover what the GI Bill wants, then I won't be doing it.
Right. Okay. So I mean, if you have GI stuff though, maybe you can do something like get in at half, and then the GI Bill covers the rest of it. It really depends on what your goals are, and it depends on where you are right now, how long that journey might take you to get your best LSAT that will get you in. The thing that I would recommend for you, Robert, is really, like, check out the scholarship estimator. I know it was a while ago, but your undergraduate grades still matter. So make sure that you plug in some potential LSATs and LSAT scores, and see if you're starting to see the results that you would expect for, like, a school in your neighborhood or a school that you're interested in going to. It's a very accurate predictor. It's not a guarantee by any means, but we can and have predicted for hundreds of students, like, where they're going to go and for what cost. And so it is actually a very reliable tool to help give you some general picture items. Don't waste too much time on that, but use it as like okay, I need to get a 160 to do what I think I need to do. Okay, maybe my journey's a little bit longer than I wanted it, etc. Okay?
Great. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thanks for being here, Robert. Thank you. Someone said I'm speaking to their soul. I love that. Okay. Karina said access the LR lessons. Yep, absolutely. Those are great. Jake said, how long did it take you to study before you started to see significant improvement? For me, it took me about a month or two. And the most significant jump, I went, so my cold diagnostic was 152. The second time I took a test, I was like 158 or so, like around in there. I was bumping around in like the mid to high 150s, just because I was like more familiar with the language and even what this was asking, because I took a true cold diagnostic. I'd never seen any of the questions before, never seen the test. And so the biggest jump was about 2 months in, when I listened to Nathan for the first time, because I went to his class. I took his class live in LA when we were still doing live and in-person things. And he was like, whoa, dude, you're going way too fast. Slow down. Instead of attempting all the questions, attempt 17. My score went up 5 points almost immediately, because I was attempting the right amount of questions. And then after that, it was just like slow build, slow build, slow build, slow build for the next 8 to 10 months. It took me time to get from the low 160s to the low to mid 170s, which was where I was at the end. So I saw significant improvement when I slowed down. And I know that seems counterintuitive, but I promise you, if you drink that Kool-Aid, you will too. Okay, score, variance, explanation, so comforting, awesome. Okay, I got a question. I understand what you're saying. However, in my case, I've only taken 3 tests in my month of studying for the test, and I've pretty much gotten the same score. That's just not enough data. Wouldn't it make sense that my diagnostic and tests I've taken today to be much better? Nope. It would also make sense that you might have gotten worse. And I'm not saying you got worse with your understanding. I'm saying your score variance could have gone down. In 3 tests, like, Who knows? Did you study them correctly? Did you learn anything from those previous two tests to today? I have no idea. And so the answer is maybe your score goes down, even though your accuracy went up. That could totally happen because that's score variance. Also, maybe you didn't learn anything from the previous test because you weren't studying them correctly, which is totally the case with a lot of people. They're not blind reviewing. They're just going, oh, I got question 6 wrong. Oh, the answer's C. Oh, C totally makes sense. Next question. You learn nothing from that. And so again, like I said at the top, you have to learn from it in order to improve, and just sort of like pulling the slot lever doesn't actually teach you anything. So I would not just automatically expect to improve just because you've taken multiple tests. Oh, you got some friends, Robert, some fellow people that are older than 50. I'll be there soon. When I graduate, I'm going to be pushing 40. So there we go. Nate asked, does the estimator skew toward being more conservative or less? That I don't know. I think it's just based on the medians. And so it's an algorithmic. I don't know the math behind it, to be honest, Nate. I'm sorry to answer that, but you could totally hit the, you could totally email help at LSAT DMN, ask them sort of like, hey, is this more or less conservative? I know that we did some things that were more conservative, and that was specifically with getting more than full, because a lot of those are skewed or reported incorrectly because the schools don't actually offer more than full, but people are getting like outside scholarships or have GI Bill benefits or that kind of thing. And so they were reporting them as more than full, like 5 people got more than full, except that none of them were through the school. And so they got like full rides, but not more than full. So there wasn't like a stipend being paid by the school. And so I know we tailored that back to just reporting as full. And then there's some that we specifically know do give stipends that we've continued to allow slip through that, I think. But I would say if you really want to get into the nitty gritty, email help at LSAT DMN, and they'll be able to give you a better answer. LR, help me want. The worlds are amazing for the tests. Yep. Thank you. What do you feel is the best strategy for creating worlds? Jake asks my favorite question, the best strategy for making worlds. And based on the rules, I'm going to write this down and just leave it here. Based on the rules, and that includes the paragraph and the explicit line item rules, I asked myself 2 questions. What must be true? And do I see benefits? From splitting based on 1? Okay, now I'm going to illustrate that a little bit more fully. I have a rule that says X must go first, third, or fifth. Okay, so it must be true that X goes first, third, or fifth. That's a reason to split. Now, do I see benefit from splitting based on based on what must be true about X? Well, there's another rule that says R can only go first or last. And now I'm like, well, in this world, R must go last. In this world, R must go first. In this world, R can still go first or last. Do I see benefit from splitting here? Yes. S has to go next to R. And so S goes here, 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 and here. And I just made that shit up off the top of my head, but that runs through the idea of what must be true. Well, X has to go in 3 places. Do I see benefit from splitting based on that? If there's another rule that interacts in a meaningful way that says, hey, R has to go first or last, I'm like, well, in this world, I know where R is. In this world, I know where R is. In this world, I still have the option. I'm going to do the same rules just to show. R has to go first or last. I'm going to start with that rule instead. First or last. X can only go third or fifth in this one. And so I split that. X can only go first or third in this one. S still has to go next to R. You'll notice I still have the exact same 4 worlds. The point of this exercise is they interact with each other, and so that's a reason to split. They necessarily affect each other. And so I see benefit. X can't go first when R is there. So I put R in first or R in last because it affects X. That's a very sort of like basic run through of how I go, like the strategy. That is my mantra, if you will. I always ask my students in the live classes, what must be true? Do you see benefit? Why did you choose that rule? Why did you choose that variable? Like, how did you, like, what's the next thing you added to that? It should be like dominoes. You set a domino up and then you set up another one, or a tabletop puzzle. You dump out all the pieces, you pick up one of them. You're like, oh, I'm going to add something to that and then add something to that. You're not going to pick up one piece and then pick up another totally unrelated piece and be like, great. You want to add to the puzzle because that's all the logic games are puzzles. So I hope that that's helpful, Jake.
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. Awesome. Thanks for popping in and showing me your face as well. Jeff said, tips for someone applying to 1 or 2 schools. My tip is to apply to way more. You should apply broadly because if you only apply to 1 or 2 schools, you're not going to know your value and you're not going to be able to negotiate with the people. Even if you only want to go to 1 or 2 schools, you should still apply broadly to competitive schools to that place so that you can negotiate. Just as food for thought, I negotiated with a bunch of schools. One of them is a school called GW. I showed them my scholarship from UCLA and they upped my offer by $7,000 a year from an email that I sent to them showing them my offer. And so even though I wasn't really interested in going to GW for less than full, I still got an extra $21,000 because I applied to some other schools that were competitive to it. You cannot do that if you don't apply broadly. And so my tips for Jeff and everyone are to apply broadly. Like 10 is kind of the bare minimum in my mind. Ask for fee waivers, ask for CAS waivers, ask for waivers for all the things so that you don't have to pay for them. Be polite, email the admissions team and be like, hey, I really would love to apply for your school. Finances are like pretty tight right now. Is there any way that you can provide me with an application waiver and a fee waiver for CAS? They might say yes to both. They might say no to both. I got application fee waivers to every single school of the 21 or 22. I don't remember. 21. I applied to like 21 to 23 schools, somewhere in there. I got an application fee waiver that's like the thing charged by the school for every single school except for Harvard because they don't give them out except for need base. I got CAS waivers, which is like the credential assembly service that LSAT charges to submit your file. Stupid money grubbing people. They charge like 45, 50 bucks a pop, whatever it is now, on top of paying for the credential assembly service in the first place. They charge you like 45, 50 bucks, whatever, to hit submit. Ask for those waivers too, especially if you're over their numbers, because it helps them to admit you because you might actually go there. Okay? Can never hurt to ask, just be polite. Raphael said, any words of advice specific to RC? Yes, read carefully, engage with the passage, predict a main point when you get done. I want you to read, you just got finished or reading the thing. I want you to look up and be like, okay, the author got out of bed today to tell me X. right? Another way that I say that is, what's the topic and why do I care? Because if you just tell me the topic, that's not enough. I need to know why I'm reading this. The topic is blackmail and its definitions. This is an actual thing. You'll encounter this if you keep studying. Blackmail and definitions of blackmail was the topic. And why do I care? It's because they have different definitions between modern US and ancient Rome. There are differences, okay? I care about those differences. Now, that's a generalization of a main point. But I promise you that like 3 or 4 of those questions that you're about to answer are main point questions explicitly, or main point in disguise questions. Things like, what's the purpose of the passage? The purpose is to tell you the main point, right? The other thing is most of, and I'm talking like broadly on a 27 question reading comp, I'm going to estimate that at least 25 of them are simply must be true questions. So you're looking for safe, boring answers. Very occasionally they have like strengthen or weaken, or maybe like a really occasionally they'll have like a necessary assumption question. But the vast majority of reading comp, because it literally is in the name, reading comprehension, they are testing your comprehension of what you just read. They are asking you safe, boring questions of what must be true. Okay. Smiley face, when is review of today's exam questions? I think there's ask buttons and there's going to be explanations for, I think, everything you took today, Jeff. So check those out for sure. Yeah, this is just sort of like an after party Q&A. Going through the entire PT would take all day. That is exactly correct. Thank you, Nate. Any tips for dealing with fatigue? So I see that there's 44 messages that I haven't gotten to yet. Like if you have a more pressing thing, please feel free to raise your hand. I'm going to get to them as quickly as I can. But yeah, someone said, any tip for dealing with fatigue during a test? For example, I got reading comp 2 sections in a row, found it pretty exhausting mentally. Do more tests, build up your stamina. I understand that it's problematic now, but just wait until you're in law school when you're reading something like 300 pages a night for 6 hours at a time. Like that's what you're potentially signing yourself up for. And so I really encourage you to use this as practice for the future. I'm currently reading and writing for the Maryland Supreme Court. I'm in chambers for a judge on the Maryland Supreme Court. And I'm sitting down and reading 180-page cases all day, every day. That's the job. And so if you're fatigued now, that's okay. I really want to encourage you to do more of it so that you get better at it. Read books in your free time instead of watching TV, because if you become a better reader in general, it will become less fatiguing for you as well. I don't mean to say like read The Economist. If you don't like The Economist, don't fucking read The Economist. That is not going to help you. Read things that you enjoy, no matter what they are. Sci-fi, historical fiction, whatever. Autobiographies. If you read for pleasure, you will get better at reading and it will be less fatiguing for you. Okay, a lot of people are saying thanks. Nadia said to get the $45 CAS waiver, must be approved for LSAC fee waiver, or could it be independently waived? So if you get the actual LSAC fee waiver, I think you get a couple of CAS waivers for free, but you can also ask the school, because some schools will want your numbers because you're like a little bit above. They're like, you would be a great fit for us. We think you'd be a rock star here. Yes, we're going to make it even easier for you to apply. And so they might pay LSAC for your application fee through the CAS. They get a limited number of those. Some schools don't do it at all, but it never hurts to ask. I think I got about 8, 9 of them, and that adds up to some change. Like that was almost $500 that I saved just by sending some emails. It was worth it to me, so I imagine it may be worth it to you. Oh my gosh, that's it. Wow, appreciate this and love hearing. Okay, Cool. I got to the bottom of the questions. So then my question is, do people still have questions? Be glad to answer anything that people might have. If you have more specific questions to you, that's totally fine. You're so welcome. If you have more specific questions to you, I'm totally fine with doing that. I want to encourage people to check out the explanations for the questions. Really like read those and learn from them. Hit the ask button if you still don't understand, all that kind of stuff. I hope that it will be behind you after just one, Jeff. I want to encourage you, though, that the LSAT's really good at predicting. You're welcome, Colleen. Come to class. So the LSAT is really good at predicting people and their competency in law school. It is not a perfect predictor by any means. I want to like super emphasize that. It is not perfect, but it's like 50% right. Like it can predict up to about 50% of people and where they're going to slot in the grades at school. You can learn a lot from the LSAT. I'm an LSAT nerd, and so I'm still learning from it. But I promise you that understanding the difference between sufficient and necessary is really important, not only on the LSAT, but in law. I helped write a majority opinion on the Maryland Supreme Court this last month. Yeah, last month, because it's August now. That disabused a petitioner of their opinion that something was necessary when it was merely sufficient. And I wrote 15 pages of an opinion detailing how they were incorrect about their assertion that it was necessary when the rule that they were arguing for is actually a sufficient articulation. That concept matters. You can learn it on the LSAT. And there's so many other concepts that are similar to that you can learn on the LSAT. I promise you, being good at this test is not going to guarantee you success, but it sure might help your success in law school, because it tests, like they know what they're doing. They've made this test on purpose. The logic games are future statutory interpretation for you. Statutes and rules look like and operate like the logic games. So if you hate those, you're going to hate reading law, just like as a general thing. And the reading comp is reading opinions. It's reading majority opinions. The A and B passage ones are reading a majority opinion with a concurrence or dissent. Like they're literally training you at doing these things for the future, because it's important to read an opinion and then say, oh, this must be true about it. Here's the main point. To illustrate from a practical thing, everyone knows Brown v. Board, at least I hope so, at least in general sense. But you can sum up the main point of Brown v. Board is separate is inherently unequal. Your professor is going to ask you about that when you're in con law. And that's the answer. That's the holding of the case. It's a 60-page opinion that you need to pull out that short sentence from. That is the study of law. Reading comp is reading opinions. Logic games is reading the actual laws as written, the statutes and the rules and the regulations. Logical reasoning is debunking the other attorney's arguments. All of these things are directly applicable. Is it going to help you with everything that you do in law school? Absolutely not. And I'm not saying that it is. But if you're good at the things on the LSAT, it will help you. And so I just want to point out that this isn't a thing like putting it all behind you. You are learning for the future. This is your 0L right now. Jake said for a selection game, specifically where we can't use worlds, I use worlds on every single game. to answer that question, like literally every single game in the entire LSAT Demon, which is 90 some tests, so almost 400 logic games, I make worlds on every single one of them. You have to be creative. I promise you it can be done. Will I be able to drink from an opaque water bottle during the exam, or will they want it to be clear? I cannot answer that question. I do not know that with specificity. I would say call them. Call LSAC and ask that question. I have no idea what the specifics are for. I would not trust Reddit. Reddit is a cesspool. In fact, everyone just delete Reddit from your phones if you have it. It's just terrible, terrible advice and just a cesspool in general. But just call LSAC, get them on the phone and say, hey, I have an opaque water bottle. Is that going to be a problem? And they will say yes or no. But I would also just suggest like get a see-through water bottle and call it a day, because then you don't have to worry. They have those for $1 at the dollar store if you want to get like a little like Aquafina or whatever it is. Yeah, our LSAT is just the worst. I would not ever recommend spending real time there. Okay, any other questions? I'm an open book. I'll answer questions, not just about the LSAT, but I can answer questions about law school. I can answer questions about clerking. I don't like whatevs. Doesn't matter to me. How about this? I'll turn off the recording because it's an hour in